starting to pin the front extensions on. This is the front of the body piece, and it is facing up, so this is its right side. That's the wrong side, if you can see the stitching there. So I'm going to place this here. Now, if I bring this together, just so you can work out where we are, these are the two front pieces. They're attached up there. So we're working in the middle. These are the side seams out here, and they are going to stay out there. So these are side seams this way. We're working on the center front, and we're going to attach this right side to right side. And you need to remember that you want to keep this at 15 centimeters or 6 inches wide. It's 17 centimeters wide, so it's 7 inches wide, and I want it to be 6 inches wide, so my seam allowance lines up perfectly, and so I can line this up. If you are not in that situation, then you might have to sort of scooch this down here, and then your seam allowance might be in here, and you sew along like that, so you'll have you'll press it like that in the end, and it will look gorgeous because it will be uneven, and it'll be quite interesting and cool. But I've been able to make mine so it's even, which I like because it means you just line up the sides. If you're doing it the other way, there is no problem with it. It just means a little extra pinning. That is literally the difference. It's not a big deal, so don't worry about that. So I make sure, especially with this fabric, because it looks exactly the same from front and back, I make sure I have right sides together. So the best way to do that is to flick your finger across this seam, and if there's a catch, it means that you're on the wrong side, and if it's smooth, it means you're on the right side. So I've got right sides together. I'll line this up the whole way along, and I'm going to sew all the way up there with a nice big stitch. You don't need to have tiny stitches with this garment, but you can if you want. I'm going to sew all the way up there, and then treat it the same that I did the centre back seam. And you start at the hem and work your way up, because the hem is the part that you want to get even. The part that needs to be level is the hem. Up the top, it doesn't really matter what happens. That's all getting folded into collars and wound back and all these different processes. But the hem is where it's going to show up if you haven't got it straight. So get the hem straight and get it level, and then pin up from the hem, and sew up from the hem as well. Start on both sides sewing up from the hem. It doesn't matter about the direction of sewing. It's more important that you make sure that the hem is level, and then everything else can fall into place. The amount you pin is up to you as well. You see I've actually put quite a few pins into here. That's because this is very thin fabric, and it's quite slippy and moves quite easily. If I was using the poplin from fabric A, honestly, if you look at it funny, it will join together. So you don't need to worry about that as much. But it's a personal preference. Always overpin. You can take pins out. Don't worry about putting too many pins in. You're just going to be safer. So I put as many pins as I feel safe in. That's all lining up beautifully. And I'm going to run up here with a 2 centimeter or just under an inch seam. Let's go. So I've added one front extension, and this is a very easy part to make a mistake. One of the easiest places to make a mistake. And that is making sure you are on the right side of the fabric and on the right piece of the fabric. So it needs to mirror this. It helps if you just have this right there. I haven't actually pressed this because everything's going to be handled so much that I may as well press this seam when I press this seam that I'm about to do now. But it's so important to make sure you get this right. Check it and check it again, because it's very easy right now to accidentally sew this the wrong way onto this piece of fabric, because it's all a bit mirror image and confusing. So you need to get it the right way around and only do it once, especially if you're French seaming. I've French seamed these seams quite a lot actually, and as beautiful as they look, French seams are really, They're often lauded as quite hard seams to do, but if you do a little bit of a wider French seam, they're quite easy to work with. But you need to have your wits about you. You can't do it when you're tired. You can't do it at the end of the night. You need to know what you're doing, because if you're putting a French seam down here, you're going to be doing everything back to front first, and I've ended up having to unpick 4 and 5 times just because it's been far too late at night. So if you're doing that, have your wits about you. Otherwise, get your other piece and sit it right next to you here, so you can go, right, that's going to be one front extension, this is going to be the other. They work. I'm making a pair, and it's going to be fine. Again, start pinning from the hem up, and you're going to sew from the hem up. Everything from the hem. Don't worry about up the top. Don't worry about any of that. That all will come and do its own thing when it needs to. Your hem is the most important part at the moment. As I get ready to press these 2 seams that I've just made, you can see as I start to move the garment round that there's a lot of pulling going on here, and this is why I haven't slashed into the neck yet. And that's why we'll do that once these are attached. There's a lot of pulling the entire garment around, and if you're in a smaller room where it's going to catch on a chair and things, it's better not to have a slashed open frame part of your garment. It's best to have everything as one, and then do it just before you need it, not beforehand. Always make sure you're pressing from both sides. Get that seam nice and pressed. Look at that, isn't that lovely? Here we are, we've sewn on the front extensions, well done. And now you can see why I do these markings before I put these on, because everything is now, it's a bit harder to lay everything flat. So it's much better to put on the front extensions once you've put in these marks. And these marks should stay here because you're only doing 2 seams and then coming straight back to them. But you see it's a bit twisted and awkward, so it's better to do it now than later. So first thing we do as far as putting the collar on is we need to slash. You need to slash from the center back neck, so along the katayama, the shoulder mountain, that press line there, you need to slash out to the 10 centimeter or 4-inch mark. This is very daunting and hard to do when you first start because you don't want to cut into the fabric, but it's fine. You can do it. Make sure you're comfortable when you're cutting. Don't cut on some silly angle like I was about to there, and cut straight along. You have a line to follow because you've got that beautiful pressed line. If you're a bit nervous, draw the line in, mark it out completely, and do it that way. Do it safely rather than trying to be bold. And then what we're going to do is now we're going to slash into this twice more. So we're going to cut down. Remember, we've got this lovely line where the collar is going to pass. It's straight along here and it's curved along there. Cut down, not all the way to the line, but just before it. Cut one little triangle there and cut down to the line there, and repeat the same on the other side. Don't worry if this isn't perfect and it isn't symmetrical exactly. What we're doing is creating, well, what we're doing is releasing ease.